You just kicked off your Frontiers conference today to talk about the future of work and more connected experiences. How is Slack stepping up to make these experiences even more seamless and real?
What a great setup. Thank you, and great to be here. I think there's two tracks, so two significant announcements. And one is, maybe 5 or 6 years in the making, this culmination of a vision we had to give people building blocks that they could easily assemble and reassemble to build workflows that allow them to deal with hundreds, or in some cases, 1,000+ tools in use at an average large enterprise. I'll come back to that a little bit later, but the other one is much newer and fresher and developed in response to what we saw from customers and what we saw in ourselves during the pandemic. And that's things like Huddles, which launched in July. It's like audio only, not quite a call, but more of a call replacement. Clips, which is for asynchronous video meetings, so people can free up some time on their calendar. And it's really, honestly, it's an exciting environment because there's a lot going on, and you really see customers and organizations digging into the challenges.
Now, one of the things you're doing is you're working to give more non-technical users the ability to customize their Slack experience. I recently spoke to the CEO of Airtable. They're also working on these no-code, low-code applications to give users the abilities to build their own apps, even if they don't know how to code. Take a listen to what Howie Liu said about the future of work and how it is shifting and why we need these kinds of experiences.
In the old way of working, you could kind of get away with ad hoc ways of tracking data, of sharing data. You would meet with people, send emails back and forth, tap people on the shoulder. And I think today, when you have all these people distributed in different places, that just doesn't scale anymore.
How game-changing do you think your new suite of products can be in this post-pandemic environment?
Well, I think they're more valuable this year than they would have been last, and they'll be more valuable still in the future, because let me make that a little bit more concrete. And of course, I agree with Howie, and Slack and Airtable have a great integration. But imagine you're a recruiter, and it's a typical day. You send out an offer letter to a candidate. Good news, they sign it. So you get an email from DocuSign, and now you've memorized all these steps. You're going to go to the applicant tracking system where you record all the jobs that are open and flip that one off. Turn the job listing on the website off. You're going to go to the HR system and say that this person has a start date. You're going to go tell the hiring manager. And it's really allowing people like that recruiter or people in benefits administration, legal, finance, sales to kind of pull those things together and automate a lot of that work, so that when the notification comes in from DocuSign, the update of the applicant tracking system and the HR system are all automatic, or as close to automatic as you can make it. And the idea here is that the people who are doing this work have a much better idea of the workflows that are going to reduce friction and simplify their lives compared to the professional software developers who are building the tools. So ideally, there's like a collaboration between the non-technical end users and the people making the software.
Now, while more people are working remotely, not everyone is. Some are hybrid, some are in the office full time. How do you minimize that friction? And I know you're obviously adopting this in your own workforce. What are the risks of this new work world? Well,
I mean, it's hard to say, because the pandemic is like such a once in a lifetime event. And I think we've made some permanent shifts and permanent changes, and there's been a little bit of a revolution in work. But obviously, at some point, the actual threat of the disease kind of mitigates, and we learn to live with the risks. People want to be able to get together, but I don't think you're going to get workers to give up the autonomy and flexibility that they received over the last couple of years, because even, let's say, 2 days in the office isn't a 60% reduction. You don't have to go for 3 days. For most people, it's an infinite increase because they're going in 0 days now. And the power dynamic has definitely shifted towards labor side, to sort of the employees from the employers, and that's happening across all these industries. So I don't think it's going to be up to the leaders necessarily to dictate that people have to come into the office. The good news for them is you get to select from a much bigger talent pool, people all over the world.
I don't think we've talked, Stewart, since the Salesforce deal closed, and Salesforce has been talking about a digital HQ. What will Slack's role be in this?
Well, we like to think of it as the place where everything comes together. And there's this interesting thing. I'll put myself in this category as well. Historically, we've thought a lot more about real estate leases and conference room design and office build outs and seating charts and all that kind of stuff. Relatively little attention to the digital infrastructure that supports productivity and collaboration. But imagine some alternate universe where in March 2020, we were all allowed to go into the office, but all of the software that we used to communicate was taken away. We would cease to exist. Like companies that have done really well over the last couple of years just would disintegrate in 48 or 72 hours. So we've obviously switched the relative importance. It's not the digital supplementing in person. It's the other way around. It has been for many years. And it's time for leaders to start paying more attention to that digital infrastructure and thinking about being thoughtful about the design and investing in employees' ability to communicate, doing more training, all of that kind of stuff.
Now that you've been at this hybrid/remote mode for, a year and a half, what have you learned about yourself and how you work that's surprised you?
Well, again, it's hard to separate the pandemic part, but it's been a really interesting experience. So we were talking about this earlier, but I have a 6-month-old now. So obviously born during the pandemic, and I went on leave, and before going on leave, I was at home most of the, more or less every day. I got to spend a couple months really deep in the experience with my son, but when I went back to work, I was still just at home. And so I could spend an hour with him in the morning. I walk out of a meeting on a little break. I could go see him. It's very different than the experience of I got to catch the 6:13 train to make sure I get home before the kids go to bed. And that's just one example of the kind of thing that it's not going to be easy for people to give that up.
Right, and something you didn't know you would miss, right? Got to ask you about the metaverse. What's your view on the metaverse, and what will Slack's role be in it? Are you bullish?
This might be one of those things where I feel like I'm getting old because I don't know. I don't mean that I'm against it, but the applications are a little bit hard for me to imagine. And just like the physical setup of having a headset on, perhaps when the technology is a little bit more advanced. Now, having said that, I think there's a lot of applications that aren't really so much about knowledge work, but if you work at Boeing and you're wiring an airplane, augmented reality would be a huge boon. Same thing in fulfillment centers and factories and things like that. And Slack was one of the partners in the metaverse launch. Ideally, we see something that's less, in the mode of people typing at their keyboards and sending messages that are principally text, and more about the button press, the acknowledgement, the investigation, the notifications coming in, and giving people an easier way to deal with it.